My name is Julie Bowie, like a water buoy. I'm the education manager at the City of Lakes Community Land Trust here in the Twin Cities, specifically serving City of Minneapolis. We are a staff of 7, and we currently have 380 homes in the land trust. Our agenda for today, oh, just kidding. Our session goals for today. We want to be able to identify the key elements of buyer education and application process, as well as to develop the buyer transaction process. That includes the back end stuff that we do as land trust or as staff. And then for 3, we also want to improve understanding of buyer selection criteria. So how we select our buyers for our developments or our pre-existing homes, or just how we choose for our initiated program as well. So the agenda, first we'll go over buyer requirements, and then also the key factors in buyer education, as well as what the application process looks like, and along with that, the transaction process up until closing date, as well as identifying buyer selection criteria. Sorry, I don't have a little clicker, so I'm like, eh. All right. So first, with buyer requirements, some things we want to be mindful of when we talk about buyer requirements. We generally have a maximum income allowed. Generally, it's 80% AMI or less, right? Those are the population we serve is 80% or less AMI. The CLT does not specifically have a minimum income requirement, but that's something to be mindful of if your organization might have that restriction with minimum income. And then, as well as that, we do require income documentation for all individuals who are 18 years or older in the household. And that includes anybody who might be a full-time student. Maybe they're in college and they're not employed. We do require a letter of explanation stating, I'm a full-time student. This is why I don't have income. So just having all that documentation is important. And then as for that, this household size AMI chart is the current 2023 HUD.gov numbers, and that includes all household members in the house for household size. Something to be mindful of when you talk with home buyers or applicants is making sure you tell them household size includes everybody in the household. Sometimes people get confused and they think maybe the household size is just those who are 18 and up. We want to make sure that includes all minor children as well into the household size. For example, I know we had a buyer who applied and she put only one household member just for her, but she did have a minor son and she wasn't aware that he counted in the household size, and therefore she made just under the 80% AMI for 2 people. But if she didn't count her son, then she would have been above that. So we just made sure to double check household size and let her know, like, if you have any minor children, whoever lives in the household counts. So we added that second person, and then she did meet the guidelines. It could be dependent on different situations. Some of them don't. For a lot of the recent ones we had children who are over 18 who didn't move back in. So sorry to confuse you, but yes, if they do come back after like the semester or whatever, then yes, count them. But if they don't, then no. And then along with that, we also consider, are they a current homeowner? We cannot have anybody at the time of closing with the land trust be a current homeowner. So if you are a current homeowner, you would have to sell prior to that closing date, or that would be contingent on that. We've had situations like that, and it can be really dependent. A lot of the times in Minnesota, it takes 1 to buy a house, but 2 to sell if you are married. So if they are married and one owns the home, then technically you couldn't. However, we've had some waivers where we can request it through our homeowners committee. So it's really dependent on individual organizations and what your guidelines are and what your rules are, and that's something to consider when you build up those requirements. But then also another thing, it's tough with buyer requirements because we want to have our set guidelines. We want to meet the funder requirements. We want to meet our partner requirements, but sometimes we have to understand that sometimes you have to meet people where they're at. So have those guidelines and requirements, but also be understanding, like, don't be flexible for just everybody and just make it work however. It's not really following your values and your missions and your requirements. But just be mindful that sometimes if a lot of people are having a similar issue when they're going to apply and you're having to turn them away for that, just keep in mind that maybe this is something that you can work on and change as a requirement for everybody. Yeah. And then also, CLCLT does not consider credit score, but some may. So that's another thing we just add in as buyer requirements. We want to be responsive and inclusive by having programs, services, and application materials that are designed to meet the community needs. Um, and then we also want to be mindful of, is it respectful and accessible to all community members? For example, application materials, we generally only accept online materials, but sometimes you have people who don't have access to the internet or don't have a computer or aren't able to really navigate the virtual application process. So, being mindful with that and then helping those who might need a little more help in that area. And then along with that, also making sure it's accessible to all, as in maybe having a Spanish application or application materials in different languages or translation services. And then we also want to be collaborative. We want to engage buyers, homeowners, and our partners to foster stronger community development, as well as effective. So applying consistent and measurable outcomes. And then another thing with the effectiveness is, once again, if something is not working for a lot of your applicants or home buyers, then maybe revisiting what that guideline is and changing it or just adjusting it as needed. Any questions on this part? All right, so buyer education, some important things for buyer education. We really want to emphasize the land ownership piece. We want to make sure that they understand that with land ownership, with a CLT transaction, we have that dual ownership of the homeowner owns the building and the CLT technically owns the land, right? Um, when we say that, we generally tell people, um, this is not for everybody. We're not here to sell you anything. We're here to provide an option that may be a great option for you to get your foot into the door of homeownership where you might not be able to otherwise. It's still a way to build equity. Um, with shared equity percentages, we always share 75% stays with the property, and then 25% of the equity goes with the homeowner once they go to resell. Um, this is just a quick example of at the time of resale. Let's say we had a property that was originally bought for 250, and then the property value went up to 290. So that increases 40,000. 75% of 40,000 would be, does anybody know? Anybody really good at math? How much? Yep. Yep. And then 10,000 will be the 25% in built equity that goes with the homeowner. Another thing is we also want to talk about the resale restrictions, which is reselling to an income qualified buyer later on. And then also the capital improvements, as we have capital improvement restrictions as well. So that's something to also let buyers know prior to buying a home. There are a lot of restrictions and a lot of different rules with a CLT transaction versus a conventional that we want to make sure that home buyers know prior to buying a home with us. And then, of course, they always have to meet the income restrictions. And then with the CLCLT, we have a required attorney meeting. Prior to closing dates, we have our buyers review the land lease with an attorney prior to closing, just so they can get an idea of all the legalities of it. And we cannot close until that attorney meeting is completed. And then along with that, there may be some different funder-specific requirements. Those are all dependent on the funder. Some require more documentation, some require different things to be done, and that's just dependent on them. So I can't really go further into that. We just have the ground lease or land lease as the only document that needs to be reviewed. Along with the land lease, we generally will also have the qualified purchaser addendum. So depending on what funds we're going to use, there's going to be an addendum added on that. So those will also be on there. So our formula is actually an appraisal-based resale formula. So it's just based on the appraisal. So the first number, the previous value is the previous appraised value, and then later on when they go to resell, it's that 25% of that current resale appraised value. With our application process, we always have application submission. And with that submission, it includes income documentation such as your pay stubs, your bank statements, your income tax returns for the last 2 years, as well as any other income documentation such as Social Security, child support, any consistent income, as well as a letter of explanation if there is no income or zero income. And then second, we also want all of our buyers to attend a CLT specific orientation, as well as attending a home buyer education workshop, which our requirement is home stretch. We like for our home buyers to attend a third-party home buyer education course, just because we want some information to come from a third-party source where we're not, telling everybody what the best thing to do is, where they have other ideas or other um, knowledge coming from elsewhere as well to make their best informed decision when they go to buy. And then along with that, we want everybody to attend a lender pre-approval with a CLT approved partner lender. And then there are also other program specific meetings. So HIP is our home buyer initiated program. After the initial first 3 steps, we want to have a separate HIP acceptance meeting with individuals so we can go over specific numbers, like what is their loan estimate, what is their affordability grant amount, what are the rules when they're picking out a house in the market. And then resale also has different requirements. I've never done resales. That's my partner Shar with the CLT, so I'm not sure how those work. And then we also have different requirements for direct sales as well. So with our first intro, it's more of a shorter phone call just to kind of give a little gist of how the CLT works and what the steps are. And then the orientation itself goes more into detail about the process itself. We also talk about the capital improvements, and then we also share that resale formula. We share some examples. And then we also talk about more in depth on that land lease or the attorney meeting and all of those other things prior to closing. So it's way more in depth. So we do 2 a month, sometimes 3 a month, depending. We generally always have one in the evening, for those people who are getting off of work later on. And then we also do one around noon just to keep some more options available. And then as needed, also, let's say like we just have a new partner development right now. It's the 6 to 8 condos where we're building 7 affordable condo units. Uh, with that, with partnerships and with new developments coming up, as they're ready, we also will put in a special like, oh, here's another orientation for the 6 to 8 or for specific things. And then also, depending on needs as well, if we need maybe translation services, that might be more of a one-on-one where we'll be more flexible and we'll schedule with just one person or just one household or a smaller group that's more specific. But we have 2 a month for sure that are scheduled for the year. So once they turn in all their income documentation, we do a income calculation. We do the Minnesota housing one. You might have a different one. And then we'll know right away, like if they're income qualified or if they're not, and then we let them know. Yep. But even if they don't have, like, let's say they didn't attend orientation yet or the home stretch or the home buyer education, but they turned in all their income documentations and application, we'll still process that so we can kind of get them further along and we'll let them know, like, yes, you're income qualified, continue to do the rest and we'll get there. Or sorry, you're not. We've had people get approved for 50,000, and depending on their income level, obviously if you're only getting a $50,000 home loan, you're likely very low income. With those lower income buyers, we have certain allocations for 60% and under AMI, and then we have certain for 80% and under AMI. So with the lower ones, we are able to provide a higher affordability grant. But we are honest with them. We will say, like, we're able to provide this much on top of your loan estimate. It might be a little harder to look. However, we did just have someone find a home with a $50,000 loan, and she's actually closing in 3 weeks from now. So, yeah, we've had some pretty low numbers. So that's why we don't require minimum income. We try to make it work, and surprisingly, a lot of the times it has worked. If they're stalling out, if they're taking forever to get that lender pre-approval, or maybe they did everything and they don't have that yet, we tell them, you have generally 3 months to get that. Otherwise, we're going to need the updated income again and all that updated income documentation. If they're not keeping in contact, we'll try to connect with them, at least 3 times. If they're not getting back to us, then we kind of put them in that inactive file. And then after a year, the file is done with, and then they'll have to restart the process if they want to come back to it. Our direct sales can be so different. Sometimes it's a larger duplex. Sometimes it's, those 7 condos we have going on. or other times it's, a smaller household. So it really depends. Those newer construction ones or those newly rehabbed ones, um, or those newer homes definitely have a higher number. I'd say maybe like 8 to 10. All right, on to the transaction process. So up until closing, we have that application process. Once they're approved, let's say, and they're doing the home buyer initiated program, they'll put in a fully executed purchase agreement. And then after that, we'll request from the lender a final loan estimate, and we'll plug that into an affordability gap calculator to make sure they are at 25% or above housing ratio as per Minnesota housing guidelines. And then they also have to do that attorney review prior to closing, as well as um, an inspection. We don't require an inspection, but we highly recommend it to our home buyers, but it is not required. And then we also receive the title commitment. And then depending if there is one of those resales or direct sales, we'll do a buyer selection. So we'll talk more onto the criteria for that later on. And then along with that, we'll also secure funds for the transaction. So if we're providing the affordability grant for a home buyer initiated house, we will do the disbursements and request the funds prior to closing date and then close. All right, some other considerations for the transaction process. Program specific meetings, for example, the HIP or the home buyer initiated program. We also do a property review and acceptance for our home buyer initiated program. So once they put in that purchase agreement, we'll schedule a property review to kind of just go over the property with them. Can identify any structural problems, any problems that might, be a problem for the homeowner, especially those lower income who maybe not have the funds to repair any bigger damage or bigger problems. And then also board and committee approval of transaction. We also do the housing ratio calculation to make sure they're at 25% or above housing ratio. They have to have that CLT addendum onto their purchase agreement. And then we need to meet any funder-specific requirements as well as the disbursements. Any ideas on any other transaction process considerations? Maybe your program has some other different requirements. So the housing ratio calculation is to make sure that they are at 25% or above housing ratio, so they're spending at least 25% of their income on their housing payments. And it's just probably dependent on funder requirements. Ours is based on Minnesota housing. The next one will also be on your table if you want to get a deeper look at it. This is just the transaction process, and it shows a little more in depth on the internal side of things. So we'll get that initial application received as well as all that application material, income documentation. They need to complete the orientation and home stretch. Then after that, we'll review the application, complete calculations, submit it for complete review, and then follow up. And then after that, it's the process up until closing. So requesting the pre-approval, completing that affordability gap, which is a housing ratio calculator. We just have a different name for it. And then also allocate and confirm our funding. We prefer via email. We have an applications email. We are working on Homekeeper to kind of get that a little more tech, a little easier for everybody. But we also do allow paper materials. You can mail it in or you can physically bring it in because, some people don't have that capability to do it virtually or online. Oh, another thing we also do is prior to closing, we'll send out a pre-closing email. Kind of just states like, how to transfer your water, how to, put the trash under your name, how to get homeowners insurance and other steps. So just some basic steps to help out some new home buyers who maybe would not know what to do otherwise. So on to buyer selection criteria. So the key considerations. So if we have a development or a direct sale, and let's say we have, that one property and there are 8 people who want to buy that one property, we don't do the whole buyout bids thing. We have that one set price, right? And then we have to select one of those households to be the people who buy that house. So some key considerations for that are we need to meet the funder and or partnership requirements. Some partners might only allow those who are at 60% or less AMI, and we have to meet those guidelines. Some might not have that requirements. And then along with that, we want to make sure we're following our program values, and then also paying attention with appropriate size for the property. So let's say if you have a it's unlikely, a 6-bedroom house, but if you have a 6-bedroom house, you're not going to choose a one-person household over a family of 5, right? So you want to be mindful of, what house matches this family as best. And then along with that, sometimes we'll have some resales that come with, wheelchair accessibility. We'll prefer to find somebody who can make use of that wheelchair accessibility versus, somebody who might not need it. And if you don't find anybody who fits that criteria, then you go on to other requirements. And then also the income requirements that kind of falls under the funder or partnership requirements, as well as just meeting that income guideline that we set, that 80% or less AMI. And then we do have a preference to serve first-time home buyers as well. And then along with that, we also have missed CLT selection process opportunities. So if somebody has already applied for a CLT home for sale maybe last year and they missed that, they didn't meet the criteria, we'll give them another point on top of that to kind of bring up their points if they've missed it. We recently had somebody miss 2 opportunities, and then she actually just got into a house last month as well through us. Next up, we're going to look at our point system. I apologize if you cannot see it that well, but here's an example of ours. We'll generally have like the household name over here too. Obviously, it's not on here for privacy purposes. But an example here is our point system. If they're already a city resident, we want to, promote stabilization. It's an automatic 5 points for yes or 0 points for no, and both were yes, so that would be 5 points. And then we also do proximity. So if they are closer, within 1 mile, it's 4 points. Within 2 miles, it's 3 points to the property. Then it goes down to 0. So this person was within 3 miles, so they got 2 points. And then this person on the bottom was 4 miles away from that property, so they got 1 point. And then the household size, 4 versus 1. Appropriate size, if they're meeting the number of bedrooms requirements, it's 0 or 5 points. So if the number of bedroom matches the number of people currently in the household, they both have 5 points. And then this is just their AMI percentage. And then with the AMI percentage, those income AMI levels equal a number. So this one was 73%, so that's between 71 and 80, so it's 1. And then down here they were at 48%, so 50% or less is 5, so they have 5 points here. And then if it's first-time home buyer, it's an automatic 3 points. If not, then it's 0 for this one. Sorry. So both were first time, so they got 3 points. None of these people had missed opportunities, so 0 points there. If you add it all up, these are their numbers. So this person had more points, so they were the selected person for that house. Sometimes you get people who match, who have the same amount of points, and at that point, you need to decide how you're gonna pick from that. For us, we do a lottery system. A third-party lottery system will put all the names in literally into a hat, and a third party will draw the name. Or there's also those online lottery systems as well. We will share what we put on our puzzle pieces. So you're gonna select one. Actually, there's multiple people at each table, so all of you can share something that you wrote down. We will start with the back. I believe you guys were first finished. So back table, what do you have on yours? Ooh, historical housing discrimination. Okay, I'm trying to write on this, but I apologize. I'm left-handed and this thing is very wobbly, so I'm just gonna write as we go. All right. What else do we have? Oh no, we're gonna stay at that table. One person will share one thing from each table. So we had one person share from back there, so then another person from back there would. Current living conditions, how do you select from that? Like, what do you mean by that? Oh. Thanks. Yeah. Okay. So current housing situation, right? All right. What mortgage pre-approved? Yep. It's kind of important, right? You need your mortgage pre-approval. You need to be able to get that loan unless you have all the money for it, but you wouldn't. It's unlikely you would be purchasing with us if you can do that. Her- Yeah. The income information is important. Mm. All right. What else do we have? That's everybody from that table. Let's go to this table. Household size, yes. Household size is important. Household size also considers the area median income as well. Right. Go ahead. You can share the next one. Somebody from back there. I can move over there too. Yeah. Residency. So, like, yeah, proximity, how close they are. Housing stability, instability, or sure. And then how would we calculate that? Hmm? Yeah, a lot of lead. Yeah. Yeah, sure. So housing stability. What else? Is that everybody from this table? One more. Yeah. First time home buyer, first generation. Nice. Maybe we'll bounce back and forth. We'll go to that table next. Home condition. Well, what do you mean by that? Oh, the CLT homes condition. Yeah. If it's applicable to the buyer. Yep. What else? First time home buyer. Yeah. That's one. You have that. And then we'll zigzag to this table. Home buyer education. They have to take that, right? Mhm. Yeah, it's a big one. Funding sources. We can do what we would like, but we have to meet whatever the funder requires, right? It's normally a hard set guideline or a requirement, actually, not a guideline. What else? Yeah, mortgage readiness is a good one. Mortgage pre approval readiness. Housing ratio. Yep. Are they meeting that housing ratio requirement? Awesome. And then we'll move on to this table. Who wants to start? Yeah. So the proximity or residency, credit score. Nice. Mhm. And then what else? It's okay if you already heard it. Just what else do you have? Hmm. Yeah. So household size matches household, or we can just put household size, I guess. All right. Was that everybody there? I believe so. All right. Ooh, single parent head of household. Haven't heard that one yet. Yes. Move out of the way. What else? Ooh, if they have kids in that school system, another consideration that kind of goes back to the stabilization, right? It's important. We want to keep those in that area there. At risk of displacement. Yep, another one. Nice. Right. Last table. Ooh, yeah. That's a really good one. Those for or paying attention to those who are older. I didn't talk about it today, but we do have a program called Project Sustain Legacy where we focus on those older households. But that's a big one. There's a lot of older generations being displaced, so something to really be mindful of and pay attention to. Thank you. Yeah. What else? Last one. What? Mhm. Yeah. Sweat equity. Nice. A lot of different ideas. I like it. Right. And also, thank you so much for writing. Appreciate it. I don't know what happened, but um, when COVID started with the pandemic and I stopped physically working and writing, I came back to the CLCLT and we have like physical writing sometimes, and my handwriting has gotten so bad. All right, we're gonna wrap up. Any comments, questions, or takeaways? Yeah. Mhm. I don't have the exact number, but it is more than you would think. We've had like 30%. We had one that was just under 30 recently. She's the one that's closing pretty soon. We have a lot that are under 60%. We have separate funds for our 60% buyers versus our 60 to 80% buyers, and we've had a lot of that under 60%. Yep. So for us, for City of Minneapolis, we do have our ARPA renter stabilization funds that we can put towards those, and that's only for 60% AMI or less. So that's additional funding on top of our regular funding amount. Mm. Yeah. Ye- Yeah. Thanks. Yep. Yeah, they're mainly going through HIP. Mhm. Yep. Though for our the 6 to 8, so our 7 affordable condo units that are going to be ready pretty soon, that is strictly for 60% or less AMI buyers. Mhm. Mhm. Any other questions? We have one rental property, but it's not we don't typically do rental properties, and I don't ever work with a rental, so I'm not sure how it works at all. Mhm. Yep. Yep. So if you want to help out those who are in underserved populations, how do you do that while meeting the fair housing guidelines? Any ideas? Yeah, good ones. Some questions to ask that kind of target that, but don't, say it. Mhm. Sure. All right. Any lasting questions, comments, or takeaways? We all good? Mhm. Yeah. Sure. What about it? Oh, so just to touch back on HIP, our home buyer initiated program. So that is where a home buyer would obtain a lender mortgage, and then on top of that lender mortgage, will provide an affordability grant, and they are able to go out into the open market with their realtor and select a home, and then put a purchase agreement in. Yep, and then the home will then go into the land trust. Yeah. Our average grant amount, it's different depending on each year and funding, but right now ours is at 120,000 for those who are at 60% or less AMI, or 80,000 for those who are 60 to 80% AMI. So we have a, stewardship manager, Shang with the CLCLT, who works with our home owners. So once the home buyer becomes a home owner, we have post-purchase support. We have various things. We do classes and trainings, and that's more dependent on what our homeowners kind of ask for. But we've done, capital improvements one. We've done resales. We've done. There was recently a gardening class or building a garden class in the summer, as well as any credit recovery, and then also just reviewing homeownership responsibilities, like just some basic uh, handiwork or winterizing your home kind of stuff. We have partnerships where a lot of our partner organizations will offer it for free, or they'll offer like discounted days or discounted uh, homeownership. Like there was a homeownership month where all month it was free. We require home stretch, but we have on some occasions, depending on, each individual household situation, we have allowed framework. But yeah, we do require home stretch. But once again, that's something to be mindful of, meeting people where they're at. If they're working two jobs and they're part-time school, it's really hard to go to a physical home stretch class. So meeting people where they're at. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.